Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the launch of the Building Recovery Recommendations Report. We're really pleased to see you all. This is our first launch in person for a long time, so we're glad you're here and that you braved the rain to come and join us. So I'm Hannah Gibbs, and I'm Head of Partnerships and Services here at Future of London. But for the past year, I was covering the Head of Knowledge role and working on Building Recovery Closing the Gap, which was our major knowledge programme. And the programme itself was thanks to our wonderful sponsors Arup, Countryside, Lewis Silk in Mount Enville, Montague Evans and Pollard Thomas Edwards. For those of you who don't know Future of London, we're the capital's independent network for regeneration, infrastructure, economic development and housing practitioners. And we support the built environment in London through skills, knowledge and networks. I am going to talk for a little while about the report just to give you an idea of the background of the programme and a bit of a feel for the recommendations and the findings in the report. And then we're going to hear from Sripriya Sudhakar, who is from London Borough of Tower Hamlets, who's going to really be talking about what this means in practice from a borough point of view. I'll start by just giving you a little bit of background about building recovery. So this programme sought to answer, what do we mean by fairer cities and how do we measure it? What's stopping us from achieving this? And who's doing this really, really well that we can learn from and use in our own practice? So you'll see from this side, we've been carrying out qualitative and quantitative research and an events programme to try and get to the bottom of these questions. And we've already launched our Insights report, which is available on that table over there, earlier in 2021. And that really sought to outline the challenges that we face when we're trying to build a fair recovery. But what we're launching today is the recommendations and the findings, and that draws on some really inspirational case studies and intelligence from across our public, private and not-for-profit sector network and beyond our network, and looking at places beyond London as well. So today really is all about giving you a flavour for what's in the report so that you've got some really practical ideas that you can take away with you to address inequalities through your work, and also an opportunity to actually pick up a physical copy of a report. When was the last time we were able to do that? And perhaps meet some people who you can work with to achieve these outcomes. So for those of you who didn't see the Insights report, I thought I'd just touch briefly on some of the themes to give a bit of context. So we focused on these 5 key themes which relate to the Mayor's recovery missions. I'm not going to go through these in detail, but you can see housing, public space, skills, culture and transport there. And we sought to sort of really outline the urgent challenges for our sector if we're to use recovery to improve the fairness of our cities. And as well as the challenges for these sort of individual specialisms across the built environment, we also revealed some urgent priorities for the whole sector, regardless of your specialism. And these are a lack of diversity in those people who are working in or contributing to our sector, a need to focus on our decision making and to prioritise social value over short-term financial gain, a need to find ways to work with communities in more meaningful ways and as equals, and a need to match skills to future opportunities in our sector so that we're more appealing to diverse talent, but also that we're investing in the right areas that are going to build a sustainable future for our sector. So I'm just going to pick out a few of the recommendations. There's obviously not time to cover everything, so I'm just picking out a few from the key themes just to give you sort of a bit of a flavour for what's in there. So our Insights report and lots of kind of conversation with people in the sector outlined that getting a mix of tenures and adequate, affordable housing provision across developments is really, really difficult and something that the sector has been grappling with. So we tried to look for some positive examples of this, and we have found that balancing tenure mix with budgets is possible. This is a picture from one of the case studies in the report, which is Friary Park in Ealing. and it's a joint venture between Mount Anvil and Catalyst Housing. And they have made this work creating a completely tenure-blind housing development. One of the measures that they used to do this was opt-in of services and facilities for people in affordable housing. So nobody's excluded, but people do get the choice. And both Mount Anvil and Catalyst wanted to sort of give a sense of encouragement to the sector to really challenge questions about viability when it comes to tenure mix and to really think creatively. And they really drew on the strength of their partnership and the different skills that they brought to the table. Thank you. The next theme I'm going to look at is public space. So probably unsurprisingly, our Insights report found that the safety of our public and open green spaces is a real issue, and the accessibility, particularly for women, children, older people, people of colour and the LGBTQ+ community. So one solution we're putting forward is to adopt a child-friendly approach. Spaces that work for children tend to work for everybody. And so focusing on young people really has the potential to make our cities much more inclusive. One of the case studies we feature is Belfast. So in Belfast city centre, they've taken this approach and they worked with Arup, developing a toolkit for child-friendly spaces. And what they found is, as well as building inclusivity and making the city centre more sort of family-friendly and inclusive for all, it's actually contributing to recovery because it's helping bring new life to the city centre. And many of our city centres are sort of grappling with their identity and their role post-COVID. So that's really supported that as well. Moving on to look at culture, we outlined in the Insights report the role culture can play in economic growth and inclusion. And examples that we've found have shown that using culture as a tool for engagement during regeneration can help remove formality. It can help make getting involved in the engagement process more appealing, and it can also support local residents to build their skills whilst they're taking part. This is Aberfeldy in Poplar, which we visited on a field trip on, sadly, quite a grey day. But you can see these beautiful, colourful shop fronts here. The area's got a real history of fashion and textiles, and that's partly to do with the economic kind of history of the area, but it also relates to the local population. And here the shop fronts have been decorated, inspired by a Bangladeshi tradition called kantar. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Which relates to the recycling of fabrics. And local businesses are being supported here by the Housing Association Poplar Harker to build their business, set up and grow as a sort of meanwhile use before more major regeneration of the high street. A little bit down the road at Poplar Works, car garages have been converted into a creative enterprise hub. And here there's studios are let out to local people who work in the creative industries. And there's also a skills and employment programme called Making for Change, which is in partnership with the London School of Fashion and a women's prison. And here it's about providing employment and training opportunities for prison leavers and giving them a sort of helping them their transition to a more stable life. And I think what's important here is these things haven't been chosen just because they're of the moment or they're going to attract funding or they're kind of trendy. They're built on, real links within the community and real sort of cultural ties and traditions that mean something to the area. So use of culture here has helped sort of build the identity of the area, it's helped engage people, and it's also helped giving female prison leaders a career path, a sustainable career path. So we really encourage you to use culture and look for culture as a tool to support you in recovery plans. Moving on to transport, we've talked a bit about how the sort of green transition and environmental gains that are happening throughout our transport system aren't accessible to everybody. And while we recognise the speed of change during the pandemic was really impressive, so the sort of speed of making change to a street scene to encourage social distancing, that pace was quite remarkable. But it actually had a lot of unintended consequences for people with disabilities and vision impairments, inconvenience but also danger in some instances. So in addition to this, cycle paths aren't necessarily always accessible to adapted bikes, and electric charging isn't necessarily accessible, so you've got trip hazards and you've got poorly designed charging bays which can make it really difficult for people to navigate. So we want to avoid a car-led recovery, but the options for active or greener travel aren't necessarily accessible to everybody. So we've really tried to get to the bottom of this sort of trade-off in this report. And what's come out as really important, and this was put forward by Transport for All at our conference earlier in the year, was really the need to engage with people with disabilities and impairments at an early stage when you're changing or updating transport systems, so that that's considered right from the beginning, meaning a broader range of people can benefit from greener options. The final kind of key theme is skills. We know that we've got a lack of diversity in our sector. I've said it before and I'll say it again. And that we also have skills shortages, particularly when it comes to building our kind of green options. So we're suggesting a joint solution. It's using this as an opportunity to attract more diverse talent, a more diverse talent pool. So thinking about developing green skills program, which specifically target underrepresented groups in our sector. And again, we had a good example at our conference from the Forward Trust, who got a green skills programme which is targeted specifically at some of the more vulnerable members of our society, prison leavers, care leavers, those kinds of things, so that we're really supporting them with a sustainable career path. And I'm just going to touch on some of these cross-cutting recommendations, and as much as I want all of you to read all of the report, if you read nothing else, I think you should read these recommendations, because this is where there's real opportunity for collaboration when it comes to inclusive recovery. So thinking about decision making, currently we feel that decision making tends to favour short-term financial gain over long-term societal change, but there's a way to use our decision making processes to do both. So we touch on an example of Southwark Council, who worked in partnership with LHC and developed a new procurement framework for their architecture and design services. And what they were trying to do was build a range of suppliers who were more representative of the borough. So they completely rethought their approach to procuring these services and the way that they approached these organisations. So they lowered the income band thresholds for organisations so that smaller organisations could apply. They created a whole separate band for these sort of smaller organisations. They got rid of unnecessary kind of lengthy essay questions in the process, and they, in their interview stages with these potential suppliers, they really interrogated them on their approach to equality and diversity. So going beyond the rhetoric of kind of statements and commitments and actually asking about impact. So what they've ended up with is a much broader range of people who are going to be there to help shape the future of what the borough looks like, who actually reflect the diversity of Southwark itself. So diversity has come up a lot. And really, many of the issues that we're talking about today and that are in the report are not going to be solved until we do have a more representative group of people in the sector. So really, this is on all of us to look at our recruitment processes and change those, think about where we're advertising, how we're advertising, and how we're encouraging a broader range of people to join us. And some of you may have heard of Future of London's Emerging Talent Programme, which we launched just this year, where we are looking at getting fresh talent from black, minority and ethnic backgrounds into the sector. And we've got our first cohort in their first placements at the moment. They just started in January, which is a really exciting programme. And we are definitely open to conversations with anybody who might want to find out more and think about supporting or hosting that. When it comes to community engagement, we actually heard a lot about people in the sector feeling a lack of skills and confidence and how to do this in a meaningful way. One of the things we're suggesting is to simply stop using the term hard to reach. We don't think it's useful. We don't think it recognises the fact, as stated by one of our speakers at one of our events, that we as professionals are hard to access. And we think changing this emphasis can really help open up and sort of set the tone for much more equal engagement and partnership working with our communities. Finally, funding, I almost don't want to mention it, the perennial issue, but on a kind of optimistic note, we are hearing that funding is out there, but it's coming from perhaps bigger institutions, more national organisations than sort of previous. So there's sort of a bit more of a change of emphasis required. And we think more than ever, it's really, really important for us to build cross-sector partnerships, bigger partnerships, which are sort of striving to achieve more, to be able to make use of that funding. So I'd encourage you all, there may be, your future partners may be in this room, so kind of use the opportunity when we're networking later to think about those opportunities. Right, I'm going to pass on to Sri Priya now, who is Head of Regeneration at London Borough of Tower Hamlets. And she's also one of Future of London's alumni, having done our Leaders Plus course a few years ago. And she is really going to talk to us about the potential of making this happen in reality from a borough perspective.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Hope you can hear me. Okay, great.